Hello and welcome to our Melbourne International Games Week reflection on Stray Gods, the role-playing musical, which just came out over a month ago. My name is Katy Nethercote. I am the Social Content Specialist for Summerfall Studios, and I'm joined by two wonderful people. Would you like to introduce yourselves?
Go ahead, Sasha.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Sasha Mutch. I am the lead story artist on Stray Gods. And yeah, it is wild that it's been 1 month.
It feels like it's been longer.
Yeah.
My name is David Gaider. I am the creative director at Summerfall Studios.
Wonderful. Well, to start off, to celebrate Melbourne International Games Week, our panel last year was talking about inspirations for Stray Gods. I'm very curious. What are three games that had the biggest impact or inspiration on your lives?
Wow. Trying to narrow it down. Uh, to three specific games. Gosh.
I will allow more than three if you
I'll allow
justify it. Just this once, Dave.
What about your list, Sasha? Give me time to think.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Before I do my list, though, Katy, maybe you could introduce yourself as well, because you're part of our Summerfalls team as well.
So I am the social content specialist at Summerfall. I run the TikTok, and you've probably seen my face doing very silly things.
Oh, yes. Perfect silly things.
Perfect silly things.
This is going to be embarrassing because David's right here, but Baldur's Gate was definitely a huge inspiration. No joke. Loved it. And that one, okay, now the other two are hard. I was recently talking to Liam, another founder of Summerfall Studio, we were reminiscing a lot about the Creatures series, which is a weird, obscure one.
That is obscure. Wow.
Liam used to do a lot of modding, was heavy in both the modding community for Baldur's Gate and also Creatures. And it was just a vibe, like specifically Creatures Docking Station or Exodus. Which was this kind of mix of sci-fi, but like you're looking after these little creatures as well. And it was wild. And I can't think of my third one. I'll
If you think of one in a minute, I will allow you to interject.
Awesome, thank you.
I'm sitting here, I'm trying to think, man, what got me into role-playing games? And it's like suddenly I draw a blank. Because my original, when I first started gaming, there weren't any real story-heavy that didn't start until the early aughts, and that's right after I joined the industry. Because I got Baldur's Gate 1. I hadn't played when I first started with BioWare. My first project was Baldur's Gate 2, and Baldur's Gate 2 kind of kicked off this sort of story-heavy, character-centric RPG. There were some previous to that, but it was sort of in this new era. So then we had Planescape Torment, and then it kind of went on from there. And because I remember the earliest RPGs I remember were like Wizardry and Bard's Tale, where you had to draw the map of yourself and go like that. And that is what I remember originally. Otherwise than that, I'm very big into strategy titles like say Crusader Kings. And then of course there was the first game I can remember playing ever on a PC, which I think was called Santa Paravia. How's that for obscure?
I don't even know.
Yeah, I've not heard of that. So
it was a little. We're going back to when there was a green screen, and it was a little, not even medieval. I think it was a Renaissance city builder back in. Yeah. I remember that. I'm going way back. That is the very first game I remember playing ever.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah.
I'll let you know my three because I've had the time to listen to both of you. Number one is Donkey Kong on the
Yes.
Nintendo 64.
Ooh.
Very first game I ever played, and I was like, what is this medium? Hello, I'm very here for this. Number two would be probably BioShock, because it was one of the first like narrative games, or like a story-driven game that I ever played.
And it had the big choice.
Yeah,
the Big Daddy little daughter.
Little sisters.
Little
Yeah.
sister.
Little sister,
It's such a difficult choice. Do I harm the small child or save the small child? You know,
I mean, you look at it now, and that decision seems a little bit like, well, what did it really affect? It was more just a gameplay thing. But at the time, it was like, it felt revolutionary. Yes. Sorry, your third game?
Again, very embarrassing to do this in front of you, Dave, but it is Dragon Age.
Hey.
I love narrative. I love choices. I love well-written characters. What can I say?
When people tell me how they played Dragon Age when they were like teenagers and stuff, it was very formative in that, but then I feel very old because I have to think back. Start counting the years since Dragon Age Origins came out, and I'm like, yes, that was a while ago.
Say, I'm flattered, but don't talk to me about it. I thought of my third one as well. It's the Harvest Moon series, specifically Harvest Moon Wonderful Life, I think. So the farming simulator and just socializing of a small town character vibe is also very part of like what I really look for in a lot of games. Yeah.
Wonderful. What an incredible plethora of inspirational choices there. I'm going to pivot us to a next question. So we were nominated for Tribeca, and we won awards like Best Debut Game before Stray Gods was even released. How was that experience, being nominated before the game is even in the hands of any players?
You go, Dave.
It felt a little bizarre, because you have to be wondering, like, the game hasn't come out yet. Did they play it? Or like, what's going on? They must have played it. It just felt a little bit weird, because it's like you're still in that stage before release where it's not real yet, because you haven't birthed it to the world, and somebody out there has already played it and likes it and has given you awards for it. That felt a little strange, but also very gratifying, because I mean, before your game goes out, you have this period. The closer you get to release, the more anxious you feel about it, because every game I've ever worked on, as we get towards release, you start getting this thought in your head, like, is this bad? Are we making something terrible? Is it awful? Is everyone going to hate it? So yeah, that it was nice to get some early feedback.
Is that a fear that you'd been carrying? Like, is it bad? What was that feeling?
Well, I mean, like I said, that's something that has happened on every game. I remember when we were working on Baldur's Gate 2. That was my very first game that I worked on. By the time we got towards release, we'd cut so much and cut so many corners, and like, we just thought, oh, this is such a mess, and it's so buggy, and we can't possibly fix all the bugs, and we're just going to have to put it out there. And we thought, oh god, everyone's going to hate it. But I think Stray Gods going out was probably the worst one for me, just because this is my game. I'm the only writer on it. The story, everything that I put in there, it's the game that's like sort of the closest path to me personally. I don't have a writing team to hide behind. I have a creative team that I'm working with, and they, like Sasha's team, you're telling the story that I've written. So it's not like a novel where there's only the writer and nothing else. So that's fine. But this was sort of the closest to me, my writing personally, that I've ever put out there. So that was a little bit anxiety inducing, I think. Yeah.
So
you did a great job.
You did a very good job.
Oh, thank you.
Well done. How does it feel being 1 month out? Like, what's the feeling now compared to the day of launch? Because we are, a month since release. The game's in the wild. People are playing it. How are we feeling 1 month on?
I don't know. I think Sasha and I probably will have very different answers. Because for me, it's like having been through this process a lot, I just feel dead inside. No, no, no.
Dead. Just dead.
Yeah. It does feel good. I like how very not normal the fans are being about the romances. I like the fan art and stuff. It is gratifying to when you put it out there. No matter you know there's going to be some people who get it and are like, what's this strange game, and just don't get it, right? But I love seeing people who they clearly got it, and the ones who were here for this strange musical hybrid game we make, they loved it. Everybody universally loves it. Who sort of was there for the game, and seeing their reactions. I love watching like Twitch streams where someone's playing and like bursts into tears. I don't know why that refills my soul like it does, but it does.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Yeah, going off what you said, which was like, I've got to give huge props to our marketing team, Katy and Meredith, who you both worked really hard to find, and Ellie on like multiple social media fronts of like finding the little Venn diagram of theater kids meet gamers, and like also Greek mythos fans, all combine into one, and you get that centered correlation of all of them. You guys really nailed it in terms of you really found your market, and the people that this was made for, or who would enjoy it, have found it so far. And they're the people that are making fan art and fanfic and even like fan dub songs. It's really nice to hear it. But for me, yeah, like this is my first game that I've ever worked on, so it's very different. I've launched or like had series from animated shows come out before, and yeah, I think because we're still currently churning away in the studio, it's a little bit of like, yay, all right, keep going kind of thing. So like Migwa obviously coming up. This is pre-recorded. I don't know if I can, yeah, but Migwa, I think it's going to hit hard when it's like, oh, that's right, we have released a game. Like I did my first talk at New Zealand GDC, and I even said like, oh yeah, our game came out just like 2 weeks ago, and like everybody was like, yay, kind of thing. And I was like, oh, that's true, yeah, we released a game. That feels really good. And I'm very proud of the whole team. And yeah, it was a great like learning experience of what launching a game feel like, how that experience is, I should say. Yeah, that's how I kind of felt.
I'm curious, Sasha, it was my very first game launch as well. Was there anything that was unexpected about launching a game for you, because we'd never done it before?
I think not as much. Like if I had to compare it with like a TV animated series or something, the reaction is pretty similar. The fans really enjoy it, and of course you're gonna have some vocal like about it, but it was pretty similar in that regard. I didn't really, it's not expect anything. I kind of just went with the flow of like, yep.
It feels like it was a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, a little bit.
I mean, you're working on something that you've been. I mean, for me, it was over 4 years, almost 5, that you put into this relatively short game, and it goes out, and then people have played it and they love it, but it's like you expect shouldn't. It's like you went through a marathon and you just finally got across the finish line. Shouldn't we all stop and like take a year off, or no, you just keep on working on new stuff, and life goes on, and it's like, oh, this how do you appropriately mark the occasion in a way that feels real? I don't actually know.
Yeah, I think that's the nature of creative work, right? It's like you put a lot of heart and soul into it. Some people are gonna like it, some people are not gonna like it, but it's like a lot of years worth of work for a small amount of content that somebody's gonna just consume in a couple of hours, that you're like, oh, but still proud of what I produced. But it really does, like, making games takes time.
Yeah.
Making anything creative takes time. So yeah, I feel that way too.
Just going back to David bringing up the fan art from earlier, how has that been to see, I mean, so much fan art so quickly? Did you expect that Stray Gods was going to produce this amount of creativity?
Sasha?
Yeah, Sasha.
Well, yeah, to be honest, like I think, David, you are well known for creating very intriguing characters. And that's what people who love to do fan art, saying as somebody who likes to do fan art here and there, they want to latch onto characters that they can to put into new scenarios, or have kiss somebody else that they didn't necessarily get to kiss, or something like that. And it's really heartwarming. It's really nice to see people latch onto those characters. And like, I hope you tell me if you felt this way, David, but like the whole crew at Summerfall were super invested in every character, right? Like we were all fans of it ourselves. So I think that was a perfect sign to be like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like a fandom who really also latch on.
In many ways, it felt like everybody, the crowd, the team at Summerfall was sort of, it's like a litmus test for me.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I have a feeling like this is the vibe of the game, and like if our team, if these are the people that they really honestly enjoy it, and you can tell. The team was always excited, and whenever we talk about characters, there are certain people who are, like Lily is our Medusa person, and like they have their character that they're particular fans of, and it's, and you can tell that it's real. And I wanted you to answer first, because I was like going to having this litmus test meant for me, it's like, yeah, I knew that there are people who were going to respond very strongly, just because I can see it happening. I mean, that's the one thing when you're developing. The one thing I always want, or I feel has to happen, is I want someone who's in the room who actually enjoys and agrees with what they're making. Like, I hate the idea that there are teams, and I've been in this situation before, that when you're making something and nobody who's actually working on the game honestly, like personally likes what this is, like, but it's like, it's market tested, it's made for someone out there, they're like, oh, the audience will like it, and it's like, well, do you like it? Oh, I don't know that I would play it personally, but this is what the audience out there wants. It's like, no, somebody who's working on it, who's in the room, needs to enjoy this specific thing, and I'm glad that was the case with Stray Gods, definitely.
It certainly was the case with me. I think the entire reason that I got hired is that I am a gaming nerd who's a big fan of history and a massive music theater kid. So the Venn diagram.
Yeah, you're not
alone.
Me. I don't know how many times in the lead up to Stray Gods release that we would see people talking online, and who would hear about Stray Gods and be like, I feel, like who assumed that their sort of interests, they were unique somehow, and they'd be like, I can't believe, like, it feels like this game is made specifically for me. But you read that so many times, and it's like, I think the correlation of musical nerd, Greek mythology nerd is more, it's a more frequent phenomenon than you might believe.
Yeah, that consistency of hearing that was a great sign that you guys were on the correct path. Yeah.
Absolutely. Outside of the art, we were just talking about like the player reactions to the game. What did you expect their reactions to be? And has that been accurate to your experience?
Oh yeah. I mean, I come from, working at BioWare, where I have a lot of experience on characters that are well loved, and in particular, characters that you can romance, that fans can get a little bit wild about. So I knew that, okay, Stray Gods has romances in it. And after we worked on them, like, I think they worked out pretty well. Like, I mean, I honestly could step back and sort of objectively go, you know what? It's not a 100-hour game, and there is something to be said about, spending that much time with a character. But even though it's a shorter game, having the musical aspect, I think music makes for a little shortcut to the heart. You know what I mean? Like you get the player to the point of feeling something so much more quickly than you would even if I had lots of dialogue. I could just keep on writing. Yeah, I would eventually get there, but here I could do it faster, and I could step back and go, yeah, I think we got there. I think I can feel this makes me feel something, even though I'm the one who wrote it. So no, I knew that the having been through it in like a Dragon Age, I was like, maybe we won't reach as massive an audience, but the people we reach, they will go wild. And
You'll reach into their heart and rip it out.
Oh, yeah. Briefly.
And then put it back in.
Sasha, what about you? Your expectation versus the reality of the player response. How's that traveled?
Yeah, so this one was like, thinking about it, it was kind of unique because as the board artist and in the visual style that we had of the game, which was a comic book cinematic, we had to work around limitations but try and get as much feeling and emotion as possible. And it's very hard when you're like, oh, I can't really animate these characters. We have certain limitations that Unreal, like 2D sprites in a 3D environment, can't allow stuff like that. But it's been really nice to even see people pick up on like, oh, we made it a clear distinction to be like, okay, Freddie loses her hat. Spoilers. Is it okay to do spoilers? Maybe.
Well, let's be
cautious.
Let's be cautious.
Okay, I can't say that one then. Cut that one. In a particular romance, there is a nod to. I'm going to choose a different analogy. There's two shots, and it was supported by Lily, who is our amazing story artist as well. And basically, it's like this close-up shot of following these feet, like somebody is like kind of moving towards another person, and we parallel that in another song, which is a reprise of the original, and people picking up on things like that and being like, oh, it's a parallel, and it's meant to show like, oh, they've come a certain distance but they've almost remained the same. Like people really noticing some of the cinematic choices that are being made, the cinematography.
That has happened more than I thought it would. Like I remember when we were going through the process, you and the rest of the cinematic team would dwell on these artistic choices, and I in the back of my head I'd always be like listening to you guys and be like, no one's you're spending a lot of time and no one's going to pick up on this really tiny thing, and yet some people have. I've seen people pointing things out, and I'm like, holy cow! I can't believe that they actually paid so close attention, and probably have played the game a few times, that they were able to sort of discern the deliberateness of the shot choice that I just assumed would go over everyone's head. So yeah, a lot of for anybody watching, the people making the cinematics of the game spent so much time deliberating over the intentionality of a shot, over the camera work. And I put camera in quotes because I mean there is a camera, but they tried to give so much life and movement to what is essentially using 2D sprites in that way is a tricky thing, but they imbued so much movement into it. But it was all done with a distinct sense of purpose. Sasha, you were really great at that, sort of bringing the kind of cinematic quality to a comic book style that would probably belong in a fully animated feature. But to see people picking up on that is really, must be really gratifying.
Yeah, it is. It's like, because I know that this game is specifically like it's showcasing the beautiful musical works of like Austin and Tripod and Montaigne, and their incredible work on it. And like, how do you accompany the beautiful writing from David as well? And how do you tell that story, and how do you make it all like come together and look and be like the visual blueprint for all the other pieces of work
Was
that
probably
are on
trickiest
display.
in the songs too, because I remember when we first started, the idea was it's like, okay, we're not fully animated. You think that the first thing that jumps to your mind is like, well, during the songs, when we want dancing, well, okay, we
Yeah,
don't have
choreography.
animation, no dancing. How are we going to bring life and movement to the songs specifically? Because during a lot of the dialogue, you can default to just talking heads, right?
Yeah.
You don't want that all the time, obviously, but I think that's a little bit more understood how you do dialogue scenes, even if you got static 2D sprites. But when you want a song and you want to be more movement and more life, how do we do that? And that was a challenge right off the out of the gate, is how we were going to do that.
Absolutely. It was definitely like thinking about it in terms of how other games feel. Like games tend to have this like high intensity moments, and you have your kind of low intensity moments. So like say like Dragon Age, like you go out onto like you actually go exploring, you are moving the gameplay around, you're moving your character around, and then like you go into dialogue sections, and that's kind of like you have a nice back and forth, but it's like a momentary break from the interface of moving your character around. So I had to try and think of it in terms of the same way, like, oh, how do you do that but with an entirely cinematic game?
Right.
And that's what the shot reverse shot, just like people talking, kind of acted as. So we wanted the intensity to be in that song moment, and that's where like a lot of movement, a lot of character poses, unique character poses will be, and then you'll have your like slow it down, give the audience like a rest almost from that movement in the shot reverse shot talking moments. Yeah. And big props to like Ben and Jess who are doing an amazing job with all the art, and they were also huge parts of like references and callbacks and
Oh yeah.
things that represent characters and motives. It was all really lovely.
See, like the little details, like I remember Jess freaking out because somebody finally noticed that on the back of the Oracle's laptop there was the Python reference.
Yeah.
Python meaning Pythia, the Oracle of Pythia. Anyway, it's
great.
I was going to say, from watching all of the social media side, seeing people notice things from everyone's different disciplines has been really beautiful. So the musical references, the cinematography, the art, and just everyone getting their little shout out of someone noticing what they did has been really wonderful for me to see and then pass along to you guys. In that vein, we've talked about the player response a little bit. We've obviously had quite a lot of reviews, very positive. Do you have any favorite reviews or things that you've seen in that space that have been said about Stray Gods, or any discussions?
Personally, it's not the reviews. I mean, I love a good review, don't get me wrong. But I've seen a few websites that have run sort of like these think piece articles where somebody has played the game, they did a review, and then they went on and they just clearly could not stop thinking about Stray Gods, and then wrote a separate article to expand on some like how they were emotionally destroyed or something like that. Or I remember I read one article where they were going into sort of the mythology, like how our take on mythology sort of made them think about like the differences and the sort of the interesting twist that we take it, and I really enjoyed reading that. Reading that somebody not only like being emotionally affected or liking the romances and like taking them personally, that I'm kind of used to, but then seeing somebody that I've made them actually think, it's sort of like they kept thinking about it, and thinking about the intentionality that went into like the setting, that there's world building here, and they really enjoyed it. That's the part that I like seeing.
Wonderful. Yeah. What about you, Sasha? I mean, I personally love it anytime they mention how hot our idols are. That's a real highlight for me. But what about you, Sasha? Any favorite moments in reviews or discussions that you've seen?
Yeah, like I think not any pinpointing ones in particular, but I think a lot of reviews were like, oh, it took a little bit for me to get used to the cinematic style or like the animation style that they went for, but like they got into it. They were just like, yep, I understand this now. And I was like, thank God, like, because it would have been a hard sell if they were just like, I just couldn't get into it. So it's nice to know that like what we did worked, and it felt good, and it was able to tell the story that it needed to. I think another one was like seeing people react to like usually streamers, we have the content warnings at the very beginning, and you can choose to look at them, or you can be like, okay, like I'll just keep playing, but at least I know that there's that content warning. Like a lot of people appreciating that ability to see that, and we do have some very serious topics in the game, and we had multiple discussions in the studio about like, oh, is this a lot? Like, is this going to be too much, kind of thing?
What if somebody came into this expecting a Disney musical?
Yeah,
it's a little darker than that. It's true.
Yeah. But ultimately, people being like, yeah, like it worked. It makes sense. It feels good. It's very unique within the lore that you've created, Dave, and like, it's not. It was very well considered, I should say. So it's nice to see people also be like, yep, I enjoyed the story, and if anything, it affected me greatly. And a lot of those think pieces would lead into that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that's probably worth mentioning. There was a lot of times where the entire team sat down to discuss what we were making, like what the tone of something. There's one of the plots I won't get into, but it involves not suicide specifically. It's something that could very easily be interpreted as suicide. So we had a long discussion as a team. Like, it's not that you know that some people are going to take something that's made. Sorry, if it says anything at all, there's going to be some people that are going to interpret that in a negative way, right? They're going to, but we want to make sure that we've thought about it, that it's that we can defend it, I guess is really the thing. So we had a lot of times where we would sit down on various parts of the game and work through that as a group and make sure that this is something that we feel good about, and that we can even if it could be interpreted negatively, it's something that we can defend. And I really appreciated that the team was on board with that, and I think it's borne out in the responses as well.
I was going to say, I think it's been really gratifying seeing the discussions happen with nuance, which I feel like you don't see too often. And then for me, because being in Summerfall and seeing these discussions happen, it's really lovely to see that our thoughtfulness and the sitting down and the discussions that are happening in-house are being seen and appreciated outside as well. It's like they're seeing us and they're seeing what we're doing. I'm so sorry. There is a kitten on my lap.
Cats are always welcome.
A permanent fixture at Summerfall.
Yeah.
I will segue though, talking about the team, launch day, we obviously, a lot of the team was all together in one location. Not everyone, we do have some remote members, but they Discorded in for us. Do you have any memories or favorite moments from launch or launch day that have stuck out to you?
I mostly remember that Troy Ferguson broke his finger.
Yep.
Basically standing still and needed to be taken to the hospital.
Oh my God.
That's right. About 10 minutes before all the buttons had to be pressed, I think we all looked over and Troy was holding up a finger that was bent not very
not
well.
in a very pleasant way at all.
No.
And Ellen, he had scratching his leg and somehow managed to break his finger.
Oh my God.
If something had to go wrong, I think Troy would accept taking that one for the team. I think
Troy had no choice. Troy had to take that one.
Yeah. I actually, Ellie Young, our third co-founder, swooped in and they spirited Troy off to the hospital very quickly. But that was for me. That was the for some reason that's the one that sticks out in my memory. That was launch day. That was basically my launch day in a nutshell right there.
How about you, Sasha? Anything stick out as a favorite moment from the day?
I was definitely being a workaholic on the day, so I was pretty deep in my work, but it was lovely when the founders gave us a plaque to commemorate the launch of Stray Gods, and seeing wonderful Benjamin have a big tearful moment which was very sweet to be like, oh, it must feel like, because I jumped in halfway through, or like 2/3, a third in the way through of this project. So it was really wholesome to see like people who have been there from the start get really affected by like, this is it. You've all been working on this for like
when
so
we
many years.
first started, I mean, there was the whole process of founding a studio. Because I mean, I was going around to publishers, being like, it was initially me and Liam going to these people. I mean, we're just two guys who say, "Yep, we're certainly going to start a studio and make this weird game that we can't quite describe to you." And they're like, "Do either of you have any experience founding game studios?" Nope, but it's totally going to happen. So there was that, and then there was the fact that we were making, this game that didn't really have any existing comparison you could draw to existing games in terms of how would it sell. Is there an audience out there? And that spooked a lot of the publishers we spoke to in terms of like that there was no easy way, and it's not that they wanted it easy. It's just that they're very used to. They look at comparisons, they look at the data that's available, and that's how they make their decisions. So to have nothing was hard. And then on top of that, there was the entire aspect of like, how are we going to make this game? We know how we think it should be, and then as we started making the prototypes, it's like, okay, it's clearly not going to work quite like we thought it would. So on all those things together, to finally make it to the very end, that we successfully put this studio together, and then we somehow cobbled together this game that people do actually seem to enjoy. So it feels like such a long road, and let's stick COVID in the middle of that as well, right?
Yep.
Of course. So with Summerfall then in the early days compared to Summerfall now, how has it been watching the studio evolve? How different is it now? What's that experience been like?
Well, for me, I had a jump because I was here in 2019 when we had the crowdfunding. So there's the early part where there was just a few of us. We fit into a very small office at the arcade, sort of a co-op space. But yeah, there's like 5 or 6 of us, I think, and we were working on the prototype. It was me with like Benjamin E, our director. I was trying to work out what the vision of that we're going with, like what's the art style, how are we going to write the story, and so forth. And then I at near the end of 2019, I popped back home to Canada because the idea was I had a house there, and I was going to sell the house, and we were going to whip up the work visa, and I'd be back by the summer. And then of course COVID hit. Ended up being stuck in a half empty house for about 2 years. Before I could actually, suddenly now the borders were open again, and I could actually, so I had this jump where mostly, Liam was here making the studio happen, but I could only do anything, interact with the team remotely from many time zones away. So yeah, for me there was this massive jump in between. So it was a very weird, like the little tiny studio, and then boom, I show up, and it's all suddenly Pinocchio has become a real boy. You know what I mean? I don't know. How was it for you, Sasha?
Yeah. So like I said before, I jumped in a bit later. I jumped in essentially when the decision had been made to go like 2D sprites in 3D environments, and my main role was to like judge how are we going to make this look, how are we going to make this work essentially. How the camera is going to interact with these sprites and the environments all together. And I think it's definitely changed a lot. So when I joined, maybe there was 8 in-house, like pretty consistent people. Of course, we had people international, like all the voice artists and Austin. but in terms of like people jumping into stand up and working, bouncing off each other in Australia, it was about 8. So it felt more explorative in, like, oh, we're experimenting with how we're going to approach this, which was a really like crucial part of course, trying to figure out such a unique game. And then I think once boards had been pretty almost done, it really ramped up very quickly. We hired more people because cinematics has there's a lot of content to get through, and all of our cinematics are bespoke. They are not just generated. So like it kind of got like the ball was rolling and it was chugging
It felt
along.
like every other week we were hiring somebody.
Yeah. So now and then launch happened, and yeah, it felt like that kind of running up a hill and you finally get to that top bit, but the hill is like going steeper and steeper and steeper, and it's harder, and because like you have to not deal, but like there's more people who need more information, stuff like that. So like it was intense, I should say, but like in a good way that felt like we got there and it was satisfying.
You briefly mentioned kind of the process there. Did the process of creating Stray Gods and what you were expecting, what did it follow the line that you were expecting, or did it go in a whole bunch of different ways?
It absolutely went in a whole bunch of different ways for me specifically, just because I was completely new to the process of like non-linear narratives. I'd only ever worked on linear narratives, and having to consider completely bespoke cinematics every single path was very unique and a huge learning curve. But by the end of it, we were like, yep, know exactly what to do. And
I don't think it would matter because I mean I have lots of experience with branching
true.
narrative, and it still didn't work quite like I thought it would. I mean, at the very basic level, the way the dialogues break down, that part I'm very familiar with, but the way we needed to implement them still didn't quite work the way I thought it would from beginning to end. We had to switch gears a number of times. Thankfully, though, the last half of the project, I think we'd found our sort of feet in, a project that changes gears all the time, and that's more a sign that something's wrong if it keeps doing it towards the latter half of the project. And lots of even big projects actually that does happen. So I'm glad that we kind of solidified our approach eventually, and then it was just a matter of getting through all of the content. But yeah, like Sasha said, we needed to jump around quite a bit.
Few pivots here and there.
Yeah, I ended up we did it. I mean, even on the writing side, I did a whole version of the game, of the story, sent it out. We had sensitivity readers that were involved, and a few people we trusted us, and just outside, like, okay, let me know what you would actually think, keeping in mind that we didn't really have any art to show, or they're mostly just playing a text game. But then getting all the responses, and then from the team as well. We played through. We had people sort of role playing with the voices. That made it hard. There's some members of our team such good voices that when the actual voice actors came in, it was like I had to do this shift, right? Like, oh, I can't think of Pan with Benjamin E's voice anymore. But then I ended up collecting all that and doing. I'm kind of a measure twice, cut once kind of guy. So it's like collect all of the feedback, coming up with like, this is what I want to change, and then conferring with the team again, like, okay, this is what I think I'm going to do, and then I rewrote fully, I'd say 75% of the story completely to a second time to make sure, and then showing that now the team looks at it again, is like, does this address all the things I thought it would address? And that felt like a really good process, thankfully.
Yeah, I absolutely commend that process. Like it felt really good to have. At the time we were a smaller team, so it was more doable. But like having everybody involved, doing table reads, and people enjoying like the back and forth banter that you had written, and then we could see and play out. It helped a lot for everybody to be like, yep, feel great about this storyline. Like, yep, love these characters.
I think it actually sort of got everybody to know the characters, like to feel that even before you started working on the cinematics, I think everybody sort of felt like they knew the characters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm gonna start to round us out here, if that's all right with you guys. So my final question is, what advice would you give to someone starting out on a project like Stray Gods, now that you have the benefit of hindsight?
Are there projects like Stray Gods?
There might be now.
They might make them.
Oh, wow.
They might make them.
Advice. I mean, the jokey advice is don't.
Yeah. It's hard.
It's hard. Yeah. I think the thing is if I was going to give advice, because the thing that because we had nothing to look at. I mean, I guess if somebody makes something like Stray Gods, at least now they'll have Stray Gods to look at, and then you can say play it and be like, okay, I like this part, I don't like this part, and we will change this part. That's how you normally operate. We didn't have that. We couldn't look at another game and go, well, I like this. Let's change this. We didn't have anybody to ask for advice. So, feeling that you now have a game to look at, I think the advice I would give is look to your team. Make sure you have a group of people that are all on board with what you're making and they vibe with it, and that you all feel like you are making the same thing. That can be a hard thing when you've got a group of people who have very individual minds about what they want to make creatively, to get everybody on board and sort of with their creativity pointed in the same direction. It's so hard. It requires a bunch of fundamental work to sell the vision to the team. But I think that's a step that many teams forget.
And Sasha, any other advice you would add?
Yeah, I think the creative side of it would be like, I do highly recommend what the Summerfall team did at the beginning, which was like get as much advice or like get somebody to read through your scripts and process and ideas first. Like I think a huge important factor of a musical is where do you put your music, right? Where is your biggest hits and what moments do you want to communicate? So like Dave, you could probably speak a little bit more to this, which is, what are your huge narrative beats and those key moments in your narrative? That's where your song should go essentially. And so where do you want your like peaks and troughs of your like intensity and interest for your players to be, and how do you scatter that around without having too much like long wait times between songs, but also not having songs right after each other, stuff that.
We had to change that a lot because we ended up figuring out, there's too much dialogue space in between songs. We had to add some more songs in. I mean, and then realizing, because initially going in, and I think it's well understood how a musical works. And then realizing as we went into the game that just like how narrative changes as soon as you introduce agency interaction on the part of the player, you can't judge it quite by the standards of how we view non-interactive narrative, like a movie or a book, right? The same thing actually applied to the way a musical, like it doesn't work like a standard musical does anymore. And I guess we don't have any experience with that in games. It does the same thing. So I think that was a new thing even to us making the game. That's like, we have to kind of take our established ideas of how a musical works and just out the window they go, and then kind of wing it. That was a tricky process, and you have to be to sort of take the. I guess that's the advice. What it boils down to, if we're talking advice, to understand that sometimes you have to throw your own ideas about what you think you're making out the window and just sort of adapt, or you're going to end up just disappointing yourself.
Yeah, that is very good advice.
Flexibility is key.
Yeah, and the technical side of it would just be scope. Like cut early. And when you think it has no purpose, or like you get feedback and it's like, I just didn't feel this, just cut. But
Kill your
storyboard
darlings.
process, that's where you should cut as well.
Kill your darlings.
Kill your darlings.
Kill
yes.
your darling.
Scope, are you saying scope control? I don't know her.
We don't talk about her.
On that note, I could listen to you guys talk all day, but I am going to wrap us up there. So thank you both very much for joining me and reflecting on Stray Gods. It's been a lot of fun. No worries. And a reminder to everyone watching, you can buy Stray Gods now. It's out now on PC and console platforms. You can keep with us on social media. We're on Twitter or X, TikTok, or via our mailing list. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Katy.